Hey, today we're going to talk about closing costs when you buy or sell a house. Closing costs are one of those things that you hear thrown about all the time. It's like, oh, you got to remember closing costs, but no one really explains them to you, and a lot of people have no idea what they're actually paying for. So we're going to try to bring some clarity for you today when it comes to real estate closing costs. All right. First, most important thing to understand is that when you're selling a house, the amount of closing costs you're going to pay are different from when you're buying a house. Rule of thumb is that the seller should estimate between 7.25% and 7.5% of the purchase price for closing costs. Buyers should estimate between 2 and 5% of the purchase price for their closing costs. Okay, we're going to talk about the seller closing costs first. If you want to skip this and you're just interested in buying, fast forward to this time in the video and we'll talk about it there. If you want to hear about the seller closing costs, keep listening. So when you are selling your house, you are paying realtor fees for both agents. It's the way it is in the state of Texas. So you're paying for the agent that you have hired to help you list the property legally well, market the property, stage the property, all those things. You're also paying for the buyer's agent who's going to help the buyer find your property, show the property, and then work collaboratively to make the deal happen. So those agent commissions are generally around 6% of the purchase price. The remaining 1.25% to 1.5% then are a variety of things depending on your specific property and the contract that was written. But here's what happens. When you and a buyer come into an agreement, you write a contract on a property, a copy of that contract is sent to a company called a title company. A title company is responsible for doing all the homework and all the legal work to be sure that you can legally transfer ownership of your property to the new buyer. So they're checking for things like mechanics liens on the properties, like unpaid HOA dues or taxes, open lawsuits on the property, all of those things that could potentially come back to plague a buyer later. They're making sure none of that is there and that you can pass it on free and clear. So as part of that, you're paying for the title company's work, you're paying some attorney fees, you're paying for a tax certificate to be sure your taxes are paid, for HOA resale certificates, all those things. And then the last little portion of your closing costs are going to be prorations. So you are going to be responsible for paying taxes on the property from January 1st up until the closing date. They're prorated to the day. Then the buyer will be responsible for paying their own taxes from closing date through December 31st. So all of that is worked out at closing also, and sometimes that brings some additional costs for you. Same thing happens with your HOA dues. So all of those are prorated to the day to be sure that everybody pays their fair amount. Okay, now we're going to talk about buyers. I said buyers can estimate between 2 and 5% of the purchase price for their closing costs. Buyers are not paying realtor commissions, so that is not part of what you're responsible for. So what the buyer is paying is a portion of the title fees, and then also they're paying, the majority of what they're paying are lender fees. Mortgage lenders are working super hard right now to be sure that the home loans they write are very responsible and will be passed by the U.S. government if it's a government-backed loan. They've got so much extra work to do right now to research this and be sure they do it well to prevent another housing crash like we had in 2008. Very important, critical, responsible work. If you want to know more about that, contact me and I can explain it to you, and also I can connect you with some of the mortgage lenders that I trust and recommend. The other thing that you're paying in buyer closing costs is something called prepaids. Prepaids have to do with your escrow account. And an escrow account is another word that gets thrown around and not always fully explained. But what it is kind of like your own checking account that's for all your housing expenses. So every month you write this check or you pay online for your mortgage payment. That includes the principal on your house, the interest, your taxes, and your insurance. But taxes and insurance are only paid once a year. So every month you're writing this check and that money is going into this account that sits there for you, managed by your lender, and when taxes and insurance come due, they get paid for you automatically and you don't have to worry about it. You've already budgeted for it. But you want to make sure you have enough in that account to cover those bills when they come due. So at closing, they collect some extra that's kind of like a cushion, kind of like overdraft protection for you in that account, so that if taxes come due and they're higher than you've estimated, that you're not short money and you don't have to scramble to come up with your property tax money. So they collect extra upfront for a cushion, and you pay that in something called prepaids at closing. All right, I'm gonna give you one more little tip for my savvy money managers out there who are buying a house. If you're buying a house and you're putting at least 20% into the house at closing, you don't have to use an escrow account. So instead of paying every month toward your taxes and your insurance, you can choose to decline the escrow and just pay every month your principal and your interest. Then you hold on to that money for your taxes and your insurance, and you pay that when those things are due. So that way you keep your money, you can put it into an account where you're gaining interest on it, and then use that money to pay the taxes and insurance when they come due. When you pay into escrow, somebody else is earning interest on your money while it sits there waiting. So, but if you choose to do that, you take on the added responsibility of making sure you pay the taxes and insurance on time. If you don't do that, you're in big trouble. So you got to weigh your risks and how comfortable you are with making sure that you are able and willing to do that and have the money when the time comes. But if you're willing to do that, it can be a really wise financial decision for you. All right, that's it for this video. That one was a little thick and heavy with serious stuff. If you want to know, if you're interested in seeing more fun videos about living in South Austin or neighborhoods or parks, things like that, we also have that. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, like the video, and stay tuned for more information.